Welcome to the show, The Debate. I'm your host, Sana Maqbool, and we are here once again to talk about issues, looking at them from all angles, making sure that everybody who's watching the show gets a holistic picture of what it is that's going on in the world these days. And so we're going to be discussing two very important issues in the show today, and I'll brief you more about what they're going to be. But do remember, of course, the debate includes topics and perspectives from all different areas, and that is why the show was done in the first place. We want to bring you all sorts of narratives so that you are able to make a more informed decision. And as always, with me are two very important analysts in the show as well. Farrukh Pitafi is with us in the studio, and of course Mr. Raja Faisal is also here. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being a part of the show. Along with these two gentlemen, we also have two more senior experts on these issues to be joining in the discussion as well, so that we can also have a more detailed opinion on regarding what is going on in the world. Two issues of today's show are going to be, first of all, we know that the National Security Advisor, Waheed Yusuf, has given a press conference regarding, of course, the fact that the Indian wholesale talks, which are going to be happening soon in November, they have invited other regional countries as well, but Pakistan has refused to be a part of those talks. Quote unquote, Waheed Yusuf has said that a spoiler cannot be a peacemaker, and so these talks have been refused by Pakistan, and we've seen India trying to gain some sort of relevance in the issue of Afghanistan by bringing together regional countries in this talk. The Indian side was included in the Moscow Pact, but it was not invited to the conference that Pakistan hosted in September, and then Iran's conference in October as well. We'll see what that means in terms of how India is looking at its role in the future, how the world also needs to look at what is going on in Afghanistan at the moment, which is also something pointed out by Waheed Yusuf, saying the fact that Pakistan does not have the luxury to opt out or not engage with Afghanistan, something that maybe the West does have. But whether or not that is something that is going to be good for the region or the world is something that remains to be discussed. Furthermore, we will also be taking a look at the climate change threat, the ever-present threat that is, of course, affecting countries worldwide. It also affects Pakistan a lot. We know just yesterday that Lahore's air was considered extremely hazardous as well. We know that Lahore now is considered as the most polluted city of the world, and it has surpassed New Delhi. The need for efforts to curb climate change had always been there. We've seen a renewed effort coming in from major countries. We've also seen upscale funding coming in as well. But similar deals had happened in the past, back in 2014 as well. Countries have always talked about aiming and working towards such an effort, but whether or not we have the time for more talks is something that remains to be seen. And of course, many questions still arise regarding how these things are actually going to be realized. We'll talk in detail regarding what the COP26 summit actually has meaning in terms of tangible actions and efforts that the countries can take, and whether or not these will be taken, and how difficult it is going to be to ensure that they do. Before I start the conversation on our first topic, let me also introduce the guests who have joined us online. We have been joined by Lieutenant General Retired Mr. Naeem Khalid Lodi, who is also a former National Security Advisor. Thank you very much for being with us, sir. We've also been joined by Foreign Affairs expert Mr. Asad Jan. Thank you for being with us, Mr. Asad. I welcome both of you on the show as well, and we're going to be talking about, first of all, the National Security Advisors meeting that has been called by the Indian side regarding Afghanistan. Pakistan has refused to be a part of these talks, considering, of course, the role that India has played in Afghanistan earlier as well. And now it seems that India is trying to gain some sort of ground or context in the Afghanistan issue. But what that really means on ground, Mr. Faisal, first your take on that.
Well, Sana, I think it's a very good decision by Pakistan because, to be very fair, India has been one of the spoilers that played a very negative role in Afghanistan, and Pakistan is not the only country that has refused to attend this invitation. China is the other one, and of course the main reason is that India needs to adjust itself. And I think before India inviting NSAs of the regional countries to themselves, I think they need to sit with Pakistan and apologize for whatever they have been doing in Afghanistan, because we should not forget that the main fuel, which was erupting out of the terrorism in Pakistan, that was being funded, that was being facilitated, that was being, penetrated in Pakistan from India in past, and Pakistan has evidences regarding it, and Pakistan has been giving dossiers regarding it. So first of all, India needs to fix that before heading towards anything else. And the very important point here to be highlighted is that India has not invited Taliban in this meetup, so there is no point for going into it.
Right, and of course, something similar to what we discussed yesterday, also regarding India's role on the foreign policy playground, of course, its interactions with the international community. We've seen that despite actions on ground, not specifically just to Afghanistan, but in general as well, that India has been taking, it continues to be an important stakeholder and is considered an important partner in the region as well, and in terms of course, peace building in different nations, including in Afghanistan as well. India was invited to the Moscow format as well. The countries in the West also seem to be taking into account what India has to say on the matter. So really, can we question India's involvement to the point where we first want to figure out what it has been doing in the past? Is that a real response we're getting from the international community, Mr. Farrukh?
Right. While listening to Faisal, Slara, thank you very much for the opportunity. I was really thinking about these things. To be honest, there are two things which are correct in what he is saying. One, India has no skin in the game. When it comes to Afghanistan, at this moment, it has no representation. It doesn't have that kind of effect. It cannot influence anybody. So how is it going to actually be a center of this discussion? The second thing is the history, and I totally agree with everybody who's going to talk about it, and I'm sure that everybody will, regarding India's negative role here. India has been a negative player. It has been as a saboteur. It has been using Afghanistan's territory against Pakistan when it had the chance, and we have got many smoking guns from bank accounts to people, they are terrorists as well. So Pakistan has all the documents ready. But there, while I think about these things, there is a prudent part of me which also thinks about the importance of leaving no room empty. That whenever there is some kind of discussion going on, whether it is held by India, Russia, anybody else, because it is in our interest. So I'm sort of split between these two ideas, A, boycotting, and I totally see the point and I think it is right. But on the other side, perhaps a junior functionary there just to listen in so that that forum is not weaponized against Pakistan would have been in our interest. So I'm split here.
Mr. Asajad, I'll come to you and ask you this question, whether or not you think the decision made by Pakistan is the one that should be made.
It's very clear. The reason is that India has always played a negative role in the region, and especially in Afghanistan. And when it's come to the Modi government and the fascism that he has created within his country and outside the region, that's alarming. I mean, if Modi, the neighbor, including the Nepal or Bangladesh or Sri Lanka, Pakistan, India is not enjoying that much good relationship with their neighborhood, and rather than Afghanistan, which Afghanistan and Pakistan do not share any cultural boundaries or any religious or any linguistic thing. But the only thing that India wanted to remain in Afghanistan, and that's because of the Pakistan. So the intention is very clear, and that's the intention if India want to spoil her and want to spoil the whole situation within the Pakistan and Afghanistan. So for that reason, obviously, Waheed, the NSA, the advisor, he was rightly in his claim that he will not be participating in the meeting, which is just justifiable. The other thing is that India was completely out of the discussion and out of the scene in this whole Afghanistan fall or the Kabul fall. And for that reason, they wanted to be remain in the, which I don't think so. They do not have any opportunity in any stance. If they want to be remain in the negotiation,
Right.
for the
I think
humanitarian
we've lost
crisis.
you a little bit over there. Your voice is breaking, Mr. Assajan. We'll try and fix that and come back to you for further comments. Considering the fact that accountability, of course, is quite a rarity in terms of international politics and how you see different countries actually taking their actions forward, is that something that the Western world really cares about, considering the fact that, okay, if India has played a role of a spoiler in Afghanistan, is that motivation enough for a leave it out of discussions that the West may want to have or other countries want to have in the context of Afghanistan? Mr. Lodi?
Thank you very much. I don't think West will have any qualms about India trying to get back into the Afghan situation, irrespective of whatever they have done in the past. Because actually, in my opinion, and I will not insist on that, I always say, the world now is divided into three groups as far as Afghanistan is concerned. One group led by America and very closely assisted by India. They just don't want this present regime to succeed. They will try their best, whatever it is, within their powers, to make sure that it collapses, or it fails, or at least it loses any popularity in the world and also amongst their masses. So that is very clear. Other two groups, of course, one is those who want peace, led by China, Russia, Pakistan, Iran, Turkey, and some Central Asian countries, and a large group of the world just waiting on the sideline that which way the things settle. So India has no, I would say, moral right to call a conference like this, and any conference which is void of China, the regime, Afghan regime, and Pakistan just means nothing. To whom will they be talking? Because that regime is not there. Pakistan, the very close neighbor, is not there. China, the main actor that wants peace, that is not there. So I think, and you must have seen that even once this new regime had nearly got control of the entire country, Afghanistan, India was siding with those who were fighting against this regime in the valley and elsewhere. So Afghans cannot be, duped like that. And we cannot forget all that India has been doing to us through Afghanistan. So I think this decision is very correct. And as far as the West is concerned, as I've told you that they have a grouping. So those who are grouped with India, they would like this thing to happen because they would like to come back in some other disguise or something. Afghans know it very well. Pakistanis know it very well, and of course even China. So this means nothing, and this is a proper response which has gone from the Pakistan side, as far as I am concerned.
Right, and another really important thing that Moeed Yusuf talked about in the press conference was, of course, not just related to India, but the Western world as well, and other countries who seem to have an opinion considering Pakistan's advocacy on engagement with Afghanistan and its regime. There's a lot of criticism as well coming towards Pakistan's side of why this emphasis is coming from our side. But he made it clear that, of course, this is something that Pakistan does not have the luxury to escape, and this is something that affects Pakistan and has affected Pakistan quite vividly in the past as well. Is the Western world not taking its responsibility as seriously as it should, or is Pakistan? Does Pakistan need to actually also emphasize on this front a lot more also than just talk about whether or not India needs to be part of this discussion? Mr. Faisal.
I think the level which Pakistan understands that what can happen to us.
This is very important for Pakistan. Why it is important for Pakistan? Because we have a history, and historically, if we look at Pakistan and Afghanistan, if there was instability and if there was sort of insecurities in Afghanistan, the effect of that was always there in Pakistan as well. So to me, I think Pakistan wants to not only ensure that Afghanistan's security is intact, but Pakistan wants to ensure that economic security of Afghanistan is in place as well. Because once economic security of Afghanistan, like there are so many things, like $9.5 billion of the Afghan government, it's still blocked in the Western world, and Pakistan wants it to be given back to the Afghanistan. Plus, Pakistan wants to have a sustainable economic security for Afghanistan. And if we look at the India's role, well, if India is bothered about their investments, the ones they made in terms of infrastructure in Afghanistan, if India is bothered about that, and if India considers itself to be a party to it, then earlier, I mean, very first thing Taliban said to the Indians was that they are ready to accept Indians, and they invited Indians to come back to complete their contracts, whatever it was going on in Afghanistan. But we saw that the government of India and media of India, it kept on going against and talking against Afghanistan, which did not work out well. So to me, I think Pakistan only wants the economic security of Afghanistan in place, and a sustainable one.
Right, but this is what Pakistan wants. But is this something that Pakistan can get easily from the different countries of the world? Or let me put it this way, what more can Pakistan do to actually help ensure that this does happen? Farrukh?
Right. Since the first question was about Moeed Yusuf Saab's statement, so let me go back to that, because there is a lot of wisdom there. There are multi-dimensions there. The first dimension is security dimension. Why did the West first came to Afghanistan? Because there was 9/11 and they wanted to ensure that there is no safe haven for terrorists, right? Now, when you walk away, what exactly are you leaving it to? If Afghanistan falls apart, what exactly is it going to do? It will become a safe haven for terrorists once again. So there is a security imperative. The second one is humanitarian imperative. Today CNN, no one else, CNN actually ran a story about how poverty, crushing poverty and economic instability is forcing families to sell their daughters, little daughters. With that kind of situation where everything is falling apart, where economy is absolutely has collapsed, if you are not going to help, these stories are going to crush you. Your democracies, right? In your democracies, it is going to have a very negative impact. But of course, while Moeed Yusuf Saab was talking about it, he actually was pointing out that we are geographically contiguous. We are sitting next to Afghanistan. The US has stays at a distance. It is located at a distance. The immediate fallout might not affect America, UK, Europe, or anyone else, but it is going to really have devastating effect on its neighbors. So Pakistan has to continue to engage, but advocate as well. At this moment, I think, as far as the recognition is concerned, it is going to take some time. But while you talk about humanitarian aspect, I think the world is listening. We have seen quite generous donations from EU, from Germany, other countries as well. Even the US yesterday doubled its humanitarian commitment. Now the fact is that while you have to talk to the Western powers and all powers all over the world, you have to talk to the Afghan government as well, or whatever passes for Afghan government, so that they know how to actually help in this humanitarian assistance.
Right, Farrukh, I'm a bit critical about two things that you mentioned here. Of course, one, considering the fact that, Afghanistan was abandoned after so many years, and who did they leave it to? But at the end of the day, does that really have a sense of accountability, or is that something that we can hold against somebody because now it's done? They have abandoned and they are out of the picture at the moment, right? And secondly, considering the fact that, of course, the humanitarian crisis is there, it's there in so many other parts of the world, perhaps even worse, that's already going on. Has that really really put a stain on the democratic values of countries, or has that hindered their actual actions when they interact with other communities? These two are a question mark for me. Mr. Asadjan, would you like to answer that and enlighten me as to is this something that can happen?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Right. We'll come back to you, Mr. Asadjan. Hopefully, there won't be any technical issues. Mr. Lodi, if you heard what I said, could you please give your comments on this?
Yes, thank you. I did hear. The thing is that we know very well that on one side, the whole world is making a lot of hue and cry that there's going to be a humanitarian problem in Afghanistan and there'll be no food and no medicine and we should help them. And the other side, they're sitting on their money, I mean the Afghans' money. So this clearly, reveals the attitude, the actual thing which is there. As they said that they don't want them to actually succeed. So there are no qualms within their governments about their democratic values, as you asked the question, or any other values at all. It is simple, clear, cool, interests, and their interests I do not need to repeat. They remain the same. But in my assessment, what is going to happen very shortly is that after failing in this effort, which they are trying their level best, that the hunger should be there and there should be a collapse, economic collapse and a political collapse, which they are likely to fail, because as far as hunger is concerned, I always keep on saying one thing, that unless there is famine in Pakistan, Allah forbid, the Afghans will never die hungry. This is a historical fact, whether somebody likes it or not. So they will not die hungry. That is true. Yes, they will have problems as far as the economy is concerned. That is being compensated to a large extent by China. And the way we have also started trading with them, and maybe some of the Central Asian countries. So that also is likely to fail, this attempt to make them collapse. So then they will come back with a change phase and with a change strategy. And that is why there's a lot of intense talks going on between Pakistan and United States of America. They will come back in the disguise of NGOs to bring investment in this area and to help Afghan and to help Pakistan. I just hope and pray that we can read in between the lines.
Right. We'll just take a last comment on this issue before we go on a break. Farrukh, I think you'd like to say something?
Right. Regarding what you were saying earlier, that can we hold the Western powers responsible for what is going on in Afghanistan? Remember, Afghanistan, there is this country called Afghanistan. It had a government. The Western powers, actually the entire world, invaded Afghanistan, led by the US, and for 20 years they kept on operating there. They kept on killing people as well and try to build things as well. After that, with the relative stability of Kabul and certain big cities, there has been a huge generation that evolved, that actually arose there, right? Educated people, young urbanites. Now you cannot abandon that class either. I understand that there are going to be apprehensions from Afghan elite, from Pakistani elite and others. India also, India has apprehensions. But it is very important to remember that Afghanistan deserves better. And if anyone can help, they should be able to help. But of course, not a bad actor like India, because it has this contaminating power of corrupting everything it touches.
Right, Mr. Asadjan, I'll take the last word from you. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah. Regarding the humanitarian crisis, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, regarding the humanitarian crisis, I mean, I will take the opportunity, since there is the climate change conference in Glasgow, in London. I think if all the international leaders can come together and can sit on the climate change, so why not the Afghanistan hunger or the Afghanistan humanitarian crisis, which is worsening day by day? And I'm sure, I mean, in the next 1 month or so, when there will be winter, and will there be no food, will there be no health facilities? So obviously, starvation, humanitarian crisis will be, I mean, on the height of the. 1 million people will be, I mean, on the world, on the height of the. 1 million people will be, I mean, on the world, on the height of the. 1 million people will be, I mean, on the world, on the height of the. 1 million people will be, I mean, on the world, on the height of the. 1 million people will be, I mean, on the world, on the height of the. 1 million people will be, I mean, on the world, on the height of the. 1 million people will be, I mean, on the world, on the height of the. 1 million people will be, I mean, on the world, on the height of the. 1 million people will be, I mean, on the world, on the height of the. 1 million people will be, I mean, on the world, on the height of the. 1 million people will be, I mean, on the world, on the height of the. 1 million people will be, I mean, on the world, on the height of the. 1 million people will be, I mean, on the world, on the height of the. 1 million people will be, I mean, on the world, on the height of the. 1 million people will be, I mean, on the world, on the height of the. 1 And obviously, terrorism transported or transferred to the other the region or the neighbor country. Same way, God forbid, but humanitarian crisis can linger on or can reach to the regional countries. So that's the issue. Obviously, okay, do not sit on the recognition or do not recognize the Afghanistan because that's your egos and that's what the international community are doing. But right now, Afghanistan needs the humanitarian assistance. If the international community cannot do much for the recognition or to unfreeze their assets or all the will that Afghanistan has. But if you can meet on the climate change in the same way you can meet for the Afghanistan and to solve the humanitarian crisis. The reason is that they are heading towards a major strategy or major crisis. The reason is that they do not have any penny to run their government, and that's the reason the security situation is day by day is worsening. That is trying. There are suicide bomb blasts. There are the crisis, and there is no medicine in the hospital, and there is no food. The other Mr. Pitafi, rightly said that, and there was another story that a father sold their 8 daughters, just for the food. And these are the stories which is becoming on a daily routine in Afghanistan. And in the coming month or so, God forbid, but this thing can.
Right. Thank you very much, Asajan.
I just wanted to,
Yes.
I just wanted to have the liberty of saying last thing about it. I know that in coming days, India might say that, look, we wanted to break the ice between India and Pakistan, and that's why the NSA invited Pakistan as well, but Pakistan did not welcome that, and Pakistan, refused to tender or refused to come to us. So we might have been, missing an opportunity, and they might portray as they wanted an icebreaker. But I just wanted to say that India needs to realize that the mess they have created in the region, first of all, they need to talk about it one-to-one with Pakistan. And if they want to meet our NSA for an icebreaker, then they have to meet him one-on-one, talk about the abrogations of Article 370 and 35A, talk about certain issues, the LOC, and then talk about our western border being used to propagate and promote terrorism from our western side. So these are the things they need to be talking about with Pakistan if they really want an icebreaker.
Right. Sana, I just wanted
Farrukh,
to...
we are not distributing liberties over here.
I'm not disagreeing with anything. I just want to disabuse Faisal of this notion that he can have the last laugh. It is Sana who is going to have the last word. So this is what I wanted to just point out.
I'm glad that's clear to you as well, Farrukh, that I will be having the last word on this show. Thank you very much, gentlemen, Mr. Asajan and Mr. Naeem Khalid Lodi for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back with the climate change and the urgent need to make an action regarding that after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the debate. Moving forward now, we will be talking about the threat of climate change that, of course, is affecting countries all over the world. What needs to be done regarding that and what actual change can the countries make? We've seen some encouraging steps come out of the COP26 summit. Before we go into further details of what seems to be the way forward, let's take a look at this package prepared by our team on the COP26 summit and climate change.
The COP26 Climate Summit has gathered more than 120 heads of state and government and representatives of nearly 200 countries to forge a plan aimed at holding global heating to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. Delegates of all participating countries are meeting with the goal of limiting rise of global temperatures. If consensus is reached, it will mean that all countries will be obligated to come forward with national plans to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, preserve forests and other carbon sinks, and move to a green economy. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres reminded the world leaders of the grim realities of Earth's climate. In his opening remarks, he focused on the fact that life on Earth has been pushed to the brink. He emphasized that the world needs to take action now or we will face extinction. The United States has rejoined the High Ambition Coalition, which aims to make it an obligation for all signatories of the Paris Climate Agreement to help reduce the rise in global temperature from 2 degrees Celsius to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Being the largest economy and the second largest emitter of carbon in the world, United States' pledge to the High Ambition Coalition is a huge boost for climate action. Following a two-day meeting in Rome, the G20 countries have agreed to transition to net zero emissions globally by mid-century to keep the 1.5 degrees Celsius goal in sight. The pledges by the group of 20 major economies who emit nearly 80% of carbon emissions are viewed as crucial to the success of COP26, which is being held in Glasgow.
Well, hopefully that gives you a better idea of what was discussed at the COP26 summit and what are the targets that different countries are aiming for. We've, of course, seen a commitment from different countries regarding deforestation as well to end and reverse it by 2030. We've seen some upscale funding also come about in this summit. But we've seen similar deals in the past, especially back in 2014, which also failed to slow down deforestation. We've also seen that a lot of these efforts only remain in talks and no real action is actually taken. And then, of course, the hows of all of these commitments that are being made at the summit is a big question mark. Whether or not these can actually be achieved, how will this deforestation actually be supervised or have some sort of accountability of different countries without sort of engaging with the sovereign issues of different nations. Also, regarding similar concerns, different companies who are linked with deforestation, and although most of them have come forward and also talked about disengaging with investment that are linked to deforestation, whether or not that actually takes place and how that is going to be ensured in terms of the consumer goods that are related to deforestation is another question mark that still remains to be seen. So while a lot of these steps seem encouraging, the outcome is dependent on actual action taken by the big countries of the world. And then, of course, we also have the clock running when we've seen this climate emergency upon us. The target of 10 years down the line may not be as optimistic as it may seem at the moment. For further discussion on this topic, we've been joined by the Chairman, Department of Environmental Sciences, Quaid-e-Azam University, Islamabad, Dr. Suhail Yusuf. And we've also been joined by climate advocacy expert, Mr. Munir Ahmed. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us on the show and taking the time out to discuss the really important issue of climate change. I'll start with you, Mr. Munir Ahmed, considering, of course, that the different efforts that are, of course, underway in terms of making sure that climate change is curbed, especially in terms of deforestation, at the moment seem to be going towards the right direction. But how hopeful are you of these commitments actually translating into action?
Thank you so much for inviting me for the comments on climate change as COP26 is on. This is really a high point where developed countries have to double their finances, is what High Ambition Coalition Group has asked the developing countries to the developed countries. And if we take the example of Pakistan, we are already on a 10 billion tree tsunami. 1.5 billion trees the government claims have been planted besides the restoration of the forest. And we have also launched a RED Plus strategy that is aimed at reducing carbon emissions by reducing deforestation and degradation. And another we have achieved, that is the National Climate Change Policy 2021, that has set very ambitious targets. We have also developed a really remarkable INDC, nationally determined contribution that is submitted to COP26. And that has set a very ambitious targets, and Pakistan has set to reduce 15% more carbon emissions by 2030, and with its own resources. And Pakistan have asked for a green climate fund, if provided $100 billion, then they will be reducing almost achieving net zero by 2050. And they are very comprehensive agenda that Pakistan has set. And besides that, the most ambitious project that Pakistan has launched, that is Recharge Pakistan. And that would also help achieving water conservation and development targets that Pakistan has set according to our commitments to the COP25 or
right, of course. Let me move on to Dr. Sohail Yusuf, and considering the fact that the targets, a lot of which you're also mentioning, talk about the change actually taking place in about 10 years, 20 or 30 years from now on, and there may be a realistic set of the target, but do we really have this much time to making sure this is going to happen?
Thank you very much. Actually, the targets which they are setting in COP26, because the climate change, it was it became the main agenda of the UN General Assembly. So it's very good that the world is concerned about this very important subject and issue which we are going to face with more severity in coming years. But the thing is that, similar targets were set in 1990 and then in 2005, 2015. But what actually happened is that the emissions of carbon dioxide, they have increased in the atmosphere, which was supposed to decrease or, remain the same. Because we need to understand that actually what climate change and global warming we are concerned about, because about this COP26, their main subject or agenda is to limit the temperature increase to 1.5 centigrade, the global temperature. So this 1.5 centigrade is already high, and it will have many severe effects. We can discuss them later. But we need to understand that this issue is coming from, it is directly linked with the industrialization and the development. And we know that USA, China, India, they are the biggest economies of the world, and their contribution to this greenhouse gas emissions, they are largest in the world. So actually these are the reasons, because when you have industrialization and economic growth, then we need the energy, and main source of energy in the world in the last 100 years, it has been the fossil fuels, the oil, the gas, the coal. They are the main source of emissions of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So now, okay, if these countries, they have reached a certain level of development, and they have developed some renewable energy sources like wind energy, they have renewable energy, they have biomass energy, they have solar system, solar energy. But can the developing countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh, and the African countries, do they have this luxury of renewable energy? No, they don't have. So for developing countries, this summit has to focus on developing countries as well. As Munir, I was listening to them, the Pakistan has submitted a proposal that we will need $1 billion. So these countries, they have actually agreed in some years ago to provide $100 billion for the economies, to counter this climate change. But they had failed to provide this much, money for the developing countries.
Right, absolutely.
So this is very important, because it has to be linked with the industrial development of the developing countries, actually.
Yes, of course. The developing countries obviously are bearing most of the brunt of the emissions that are being produced by the developing countries. We're short on time, so I'll just take quick comments from Farrukh and Faisal before we conclude. Farrukh, why don't you go first?
Right. Pakistan is eighth most vulnerable country when it comes to climate change, and it is not a small thing. Mercifully, we have a prime minister who actually hit the ground running by introducing this billion trees tsunami, and it continues now, trillions. But regarding praise, Prime Minister has been praised. I think US President is also doing his bit. China, other countries are going to commit as well. One surprising thing that came across to me and that stood out was that India's Modi actually promised that India is going to reduce its emissions to zero by the year 2070. He is 71 himself. I don't understand whether he is planning to ensure that he remains alive until he is 120 and or his ghost does it. But here's the problem. Regarding COP26, repeatedly we have seen that we keep on talking about mitigation. We don't talk about regeneration. There is a lot of technology now available. There are wealthy people like Elon Musk and umpteen others who actually made $140 billion within this year. These people, if they can conquer space, can't they actually contribute to filling the ozone layer or creating, regenerating the environment? I think they can. We should be pushing all of them to focus on that side as well.
Right, Faisal?
Yeah, I would fully agree with Farrukh, and I just want to add that Dr. Yusuf has highlighted a very important point when he said that renewable source of energy and alternate source of energy, we need to look for that. And 4 countries, they are adjacent to each other: China, India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. If we take 4 countries, it's almost half population of the world. So if half population of the world is living here, then I think we need to focus on it more and more. And Pakistan, having Prime Minister Imran Khan, as Farrukh has mentioned earlier, I think we are blessed with him that he has already initiated billion tree tsunami and these sort of things. I think they will really help in coming years.
Right, of course, and these efforts are deeply appreciated by people in Pakistan and the world over as well, and of course they're extremely important in making sure that we curb climate change. But then again, of course, it's not just the developing world that has to do its part. A major chunk of the responsibility lies on the western part of the world as well, and the big contributors of the emissions of greenhouse gases, they really need to step up as well, because at the end of the day, this is something that is going to affect everyone and perhaps is the most urgent threat that is facing humanity at the moment. That's all we have for now. Thank you so much for watching.